And welcome to the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce's Work at Home Wednesday call. I'm Deborah Hooper, the COO for the Chamber, and it's my pleasure to be your host today. We would love to have you also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find us at GSO Chamber for the latest information. We're also going to continue sending out our post-call communication to our members that has a recording of the call and any relevant links. If you're not a member and you've joined us today, welcome. All links to the resources and the recordings will be on our website at greensboro.org/COVID-19. And we have been making this ask on every daily action call for the last 2 months, and it's a really important ask. If you have not yet, we ask that you please fill out your 2020 U.S. Census form and encourage others to do the same. We really need to make sure that we have a strong completion rate for Guilford County, but also for North Carolina, so that we can get the additional congressional seats and the additional federal funding that we need and deserve based on the growth since the last census back in 2010. I do want to thank our Circle of Champions partners. They support our programming year-round and enable us to bring programming like this to you today. At the platinum level, we have a Legacy Federal Credit Union, Home Health, Lincoln Financial Group, Truliant Federal Credit Union, and VF Corporation. At the gold level, Novant Health, and at the silver level, Global Brands Group, Kelly Office Solutions, Ralph Lauren, Staunton Capital, and Wake Forest Baptist Health. Well, last Friday afternoon, we officially entered Phase 1 of Governor Cooper's current executive order, and we'll be operating under Phase 1 guidelines until 5 o'clock on May 22nd, or until a new executive order is issued. So under Phase 1, for many businesses, nonprofits, and governmental agencies, this means that we've had the opportunity to go back to work in our offices, while we also have many employees who may be continuing to work remotely. So as we've thought about what this may feel like for our teams, this whole idea that, well, our team is still really not able to be back together, we may sometimes feel like we have a divided team if we're not careful and mindful to do the things that we need to be doing to make sure that that doesn't happen and that we're preserving our corporate culture, if you will. I know that at the Greensboro Chamber, we have core values, and we have them summarized on just a little one sheet, if you will, and one of those core values is inclusion. And it literally says, we welcome all voices in our conversations to provide a better outcome. So as I've thought about this, when everybody's in the office, it's so easy to, sometimes just include everybody. But when some are in the office and some are still working remotely from home, I really think we have to be more mindful to have conversations that do include all the voices that we need in a conversation. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to preserve our corporate culture. And our topic speaker is Noel DiBona. Over the past 15 years, Noel has developed methods to improve the productivity of technical staff, manufacturing operations, and service businesses by working with all levels of leadership, including first-line supervision. His innovative approach to sustain long-term business gains for his clients are rooted in the understanding of human behavior and the soft skills needed to improve company culture, employee engagement. So Noel, welcome. I do want to remind everyone on the call to please put questions that you may have for Noel in the chat room, and he'll be glad to answer them. So Noel, I am going to turn it over to you. I know that you've got a terrific presentation that's going to be very engaging for us today. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Deborah. It's truly an honor for me to be here today to talk with everybody. This is such an important topic, and I'm very hopeful that some will find it, although maybe information that they already know, but just to bring it to the front of their minds in order to be able to act on it. Knowledge is not really very good unless we can act on it and put it into practical practice. And so that's really what we're going to talk today, is a little bit really going to be more of a pragmatic approach, and it's going to be, I think, very insightful. We're going to have a participative meeting where you can go ahead and participate in some Menti type polls, and we'll go through the details of that as we proceed forward. So once again, thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it, and I'm excited about this call today.
Well, we're excited to have you with us, Noel.
Thank you. All right. So it's a little sound action there, just be able to really bring into focus what we're faced with. And it's, without getting overly dramatic about it and saying the same things over and over and over, it does bear mentioning that really this particular quote is a very interesting quote because it works in practice, and it really means that the strongest don't really survive, and the ones that are the smartest don't necessarily survive. It's those that can truly adapt and adjust to the changes in environment. And I'd like to add just one more thought on this particular slide here that I think is really important. In 2010, after the Great Recession of 2008 had finally left us and we're back onto the road of recovery, the Harvard Business Review published an article called Roaring Out of Recession. And it's very, very humbling to note that only 9% of the companies came out stronger once they weathered that recession. Many went out of business. And so I don't say that to frighten anybody or to become overly dramatic on the call, but I do think that with paying attention to your corporate culture will help you and your company come out of this stronger. So we'd like to talk a little bit about the 3 issues that your company might be facing at this particular point in time. Don't worry about going to menti.com at this moment. I'll explain that briefly as we go through this slide. But first, let's talk about some of the issues that we all face. Certainly, there's a lot of uncertainty and fear. Some of you may have experienced reductions in force. Perhaps a change in business strategy where you had to pivot very quickly just based on all the constraints that we're dealing with. Supply chain disruption, we've heard a lot about that. Low productivity. Managing remote teams, as Deborah had mentioned, the difficulties with having some of us working out of the office and others of us working remote from home and not really maybe feeling as included as they really should, and maybe harboring some additional uncertainty, fear, misplaced feelings, and just poor perceptions, which really are nothing more than just perception, but perception is reality when you're dealing with people, and we all know that. Higher overhead cost. What I'd like to do is go back into, unless customers, certainly a lot of us do not have the numbers of customers that are able to buy from us that we had prior to this. A lot of companies were planning on a really bang up 2020 year. So if you go to www.menti.com, you can bring it up on your smartphone if you'd like to. And if you input that code, 290709, you'll be brought into a multiple choice or a listing where you can choose the top 3 issues. It's really self-explanatory and very easy to use. I'm going to go into another document here. And I'm getting some really good responses here. And I'll go ahead and share this as they're coming in. And
Oh,
you'll see
wow.
that, wow, we have some uncertainty in fear, less customers buying, and change in business strategy. Very interesting. I'm going to let that go for another 30 seconds to see if we get any more responses. I think that might be it. Oh,
Oh,
we got
we did
another
get
one.
some more.
So low productivity.
Hmm.
Less customers hitting number 2. Oh, got some more.
Yes. I think it took us just a minute to get logged in and answering that question.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't want to rush everybody.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's good. All right, Noel, I think those first two are definitely locked in.
Yeah, I think so. So we're going to talk a lot about those particular issues during the balance of today's presentation. So we'll go ahead and transition over to the rest of the slideshow here. And we'll just fast forward on to the next slide. Okay, we want to do one more of these because it's very important as we talk about culture today. What is our frame of reference? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these. Absolutely imperative that people talk about team dynamics during the hiring process and evaluate for that. So these are things that companies can do to preserve its culture. And just as a frame of reference, if you would, we'll go back into Menti on another question, and then we'll talk about these different things to see how many of our companies that we work for deal with this on a regular basis. Clearly define and communicate core values and expectations. Communication, communication, communication. Employees informed, and that they know their role and what their objectives are of the business strategy. That is really important. Transparency about strategy and performance metrics. People can't do what they don't know. Actively measuring and diagnosing the current culture. Cultures change a lot over the course of time, depending on what types of circumstances a particular organization may be experiencing at any time. Assess job candidate for cultural fit, another good one. Engage in activities together outside of work. Reward for behaviors that exemplify the culture. Personal and career development. And really treating people fairly and making sure that they're treated fairly and having an overall positive outlook on the organization is really important. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a new share. I'm going to go back to the Mentimeter. And we're going to get out of this one. And we're going to go into the next one. And we'll go to the second page of this presentation. And that is, how many steps has your company taken during the last 12 months? You can answer one of 3 choices: less than 5, between 5 and 7, or 8 or more. Great. We got a couple of respondents that said between 5 and 7. 8 or more. That's great. Very nice.
Noel, do you have a frame of reference for what, when you've done this before, that could compare us to our responses today to what you've seen before?
Absolutely. Great question, Deborah. I appreciate you asking that. So the way that this works, when I do this with clients, basically less than 5 would be a definite red. Between 5 and 7 would be a yellow, where it's good, but there's a lot of opportunity or significant opportunity for improvement. And then 8 or more is getting to be pretty solid. So that would be just a rough idea of how they're categorized in terms of the types of responses. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So as you look at our results today, what does this say to you?
This says to me that out of the folks that answered this question, that we have some work that we could do to continue strengthening our culture. And in fact, and I'm going to go ahead and go back on to the presentation here. Go back into it. Okay, we're back to the presentation. We'll go to the next slide. Can you see my slide now?
Yes.
Good. And we'll talk what happens when we're under pressure with culture. There's a spoken vision, values, and purpose. Those are all words that come out that are published by companies and very powerful. But yet, the employees' feelings and attitudes can change as external types of situations arise. In particular, we're concerned about having the current crisis, and I will tell you that it is a well-known fact that misalignment is more likely to occur when organizations are in crisis mode. It's very, very important that we're more vigilant now than we have been in the past, because basically what happens in a very aligned, where there's not a lot of external stress and situations that are arising as crisis unfolds, these circles are pretty much concentric. And then as we experience stress, anxiety, some of the feelings that people have toward being confused or maybe not communicated with properly, or all those kinds of things, we begin to break away. And we only have a small amount of alignment, whereas before we had a lot. So in answering your question, Deborah, it's very, very important that we continue to talk a lot more about what is going on in terms of culture and how to reinforce that. There are some blockers that we have to be mindful of in terms of our desire to achieve great results. And essentially, culture is a big part of it. But the way this depiction works is that you see there's forces of disengagement. They pull your good people down, which means that they're just doing the things that they have to do, the minimum requirements. Whereas when they're truly engaged and everybody is aligned with the culture, everybody's happy and productive, there's a lot of people that are performing up here, and they're going to really do a lot of discretionary additional work. You don't really even have to ask them. But if you've got some people working out of the home and you've got others working in the office, and maybe their mission has changed, maybe they're being asked to do different things, their job fit might not be as good, maybe their manager may be a little bit, maybe difficult for that person to deal with a split workforce, maybe they're not as effective as they were when everybody was in the office. And then of course the culture we talked about, we have to stay on top of that, making sure that our attitudes and behaviors are aligned. And then of course the dynamic of the team. So it's really a combination of all these things that we're wrestling with today as we go through the crisis. There are some team building activities that you can do, and I think they're really important. And just give you folks some ideas, kind of get the thought process going. We can encourage virtual coffee meetups. I know that there's a lot of companies out there that I work with that do this sort of thing. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's a lot better to have some contact with folks as opposed to no contact. It really helps out people. Kick meetings off with an icebreaker. I think in times of where there's a lot of stress and anxiety going on, I think it's really, really important to bring some levity to the situation. And, you know, I remember when I was a ranger in the Army, and at the worst possible times when we all got together, we always had a particular joke or an icebreaker essentially to kind of break the tension. Very effective. Hop on video conference calls for a virtual lunch. I'm doing that now quite a bit, and it's fun. No meeting times. I think it's very, very important that folks that have to really get a lot of work done in a short period of time are given the opportunity where there's not any infringement of meeting times. And there's a no meeting truce that's called for particular periods every workday. Maybe you can set up a Slack channel. Maybe it's a book club or another themed Slack channel, but people are using this quite a bit. Digital game nights, that's pretty cool. That's kind of fun. One of the things about culture is doing things outside of work, and this is certainly something that is appropriate for this time where you really can't go to the bowling alley or to the ball field or any of that. Team building, virtual workshop sessions, and exploring the behavioral strengths of your team. It's really all about the collective behaviors and attitudes of your entire workforce that makes up the culture, and that we want to keep aligned with the culture as we go through times of crisis. Really, when you talk about your purpose, your values, your vision, it really comes out, the true company comes out in times of crisis.
So Noel, how would you suggest that companies actually explore the behavior of their teams, right? Like, how do they do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, just talking, just being available to talk, even though some may be working out of the home and unavailable to come into the office, or unable rather to come into the office, just an ongoing chat. Hey, how are you doing? And another great thing to do with your team is to show your vulnerability as a leader. There's nothing better than when you can really get a sense of trust from your leader when that person is able to put their cards on the table and be a real person. Frequently as leaders, we tend to kind of insulate ourselves and we keep our arms crossed kind of in our minds at least, and we don't share much information sometimes. Being vulnerable as a leader is a huge way of doing that. The other thing that you can do is you can do assessments of people's behaviors, and we'll talk a little bit about some types of different activities that we can do in that regard. I want to talk about 4 types of culture very quickly: cultivating, friendly and supportive, and companies are kind of a blend of these different things. But there are just 4 different types of culture that, the way I define company culture, that I find very helpful. Stabilizing, formal and structured, process-oriented, exploring, dynamic, creative, innovative. Producing, bottom line results, and it's very competitive. Now, we talked about, on the previous slide, we talked about the organizational culture. The organizational culture is inextricably linked to the strategic framework of the company and those same 4 quadrants. So now you have processes and ways of doing your work that is aligned with the culture. And then finally, you have teams below all of that that actually execute the work, and they also have different behavioral preferences. Cultivating, stabilizing, producing, and exploring. It's the same type of thing. And we're really trying to see the linkages between the culture, the spoken values and vision and purpose, people's behavior, whether they be collective in terms of a organization, in terms of a team, and individuals as well. And then we have individual preferences. And we kind of line this all up and we see what's a good fit and what's not a good fit. And so further to Deborah's question about how do you really understand what's going on with your folks and how do you get into those kind of not, subjective, touchy-feely types of things. There's ways of doing that in terms of being able to take very simple assessments, and really companies that are on the cutting edge of really safeguarding their culture will do assessments on a regular basis. In fact, that's how I got involved with all this. When I was a vice president of innovation and engineering, I had a group of folks that worked with me on a multitude of different things, and I was able to, over a period of 3 or 4 years, track individuals on a quarterly basis, and it was fascinating. And if anybody's interested in learning more about that, I certainly could entertain some conversation. Here we take the results of the assessment and we stack it up and overlay this data on that same quadrant. So just to kind of, before we go into the next slide, I guess, just to summarize that the culture, the values and vision and purpose, the true north of the company really has to be reflected in the people, and that during times of stress, such as what we're dealing with right now, people tend to revert back to other behaviors, and all these behaviors that you see on the screen come out in a very, very emphasized manner when we're under stress and anxiety. So we can hold it together when everything's going well, but when something doesn't happen or happens that shouldn't, or you don't think should happen, or it's a particular problem, we have these behaviors that come to the surface depending on our personality traits. And those are the things that we really have to understand about our teammates before we can effectively be good coworkers, good peers, good managers, and good folks to be on a, managers need to rely on their folks that are open-minded, that can deal with their behaviors, and a self-awareness in order to make things, change things as circumstances warrant. It's a dynamic situation. You got a lot of moving parts.
So Noel, can you go back to that one just for a moment?
Absolutely.
So as we look at this particular one with you, could you describe what this is telling us about this particular team?
What this says about this particular team is that the majority, virtually everybody, is really in the innovation and agility sector of this quadrant. And really what that means is that they're very exploring, they like new things, they're agile, they can multitask, all those kind of things that many companies really like to be able to do. However, some of them on the line here, they can go just as easily into the producing mode where there's results and discipline. And then these folks here in the middle kind of are really can do a lot of different things in each one of these quadrants. But you would never ask, you would ask perhaps sometimes for people to have to shift one quadrant to the left, one quadrant down to the right, counterclockwise. These folks up here would have a hard time coming all the way and really thriving in a process-driven environment where there's a lot of precision and different types of processes that need to be dealt with. And these folks up in here, of course, would be very oriented towards collaboration, teamwork. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Do you think that there needs to be a balance between the quadrants for a team to work
Absolutely.
effectively?
Absolutely. As we see in this right here, the company culture in the blue, or the purple, I guess, in the purple, really relies on these two quadrants very strongly. And they've got folks that are out here. So yes, you very much want to staff your team with the correct mix of people that is conducive to you realizing your culture. And the way in order to gauge how you are effectively utilizing your culture is through business results. So culture becomes strategy, and strategy translates into business results. Without business results, we really don't have any reason to be in business.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, Deborah. Those are great questions. I appreciate you asking them. We're just going to quickly go over managing remote teams because I think it's important that people have some takeaways from today's meeting. So we want to develop trust through positive actions. That's a really big part of culture, in particular with folks that are working remotely because they feel left out. Find out what motivates your employees. Again, that's really asking managers to get a better idea of who your people truly are. And a lot of you, I'm sure, already know this about some of your employees, but we have to do it with all of our employees, not just the ones that we find easy to talk with. Allow for a flexible schedule, absolutely, especially with kids out of school. That's a big deal. Communicate, communicate, communicate. I can't stress that enough. Under normal situations, we find that the root cause to most misalignments within organizations is deeply rooted in communication, not technology, but it's communication. Team engagements, you know, we just have to, we have to really encourage people, but we also have to, you know, we have to hold them accountable to engage, and we need to make it safe for them to engage. Everybody needs to be given a sense of psychological safety. If somebody says something that isn't quite right or it's a little bit off, maybe you can steer the conversation in a positive way, but certainly not to think ill of that person or make them feel bad. We encourage them to engage. Absolutely build a strong culture. So, so just three key takeaways with our presentation today, and that I'm really happy to answer any questions as we go forward. But that is just to create a plan and be able to communicate the plan effectively. Is really, really, really important. It sounds so basic and so fundamental, but if people don't understand what success looks like, that under the duress and the circumstances that prevail in today's environment, people are really going to feel left out, and they're not going to feel like they're adding value. And you know, this is the biggest displacement of capital, of human capital, that we have since Second World War. And when times get better, you know, people will leave in droves. But there's a good part of this. There's a good thing, and that is that if you do these things right today, when times are bad, you're going to create an unbelievable sense of loyalty with your employees, and that's really what we're talking about today. Empower the teams and the talent you do have. You know, you have to make the best of that, and based like what Deborah was asking about in terms of, you know, how do you get people to do different things and staffing teams to have well-rounded teams. You have to be able to empower them and get them to take on new challenges without feeling intimidated, and really be transparent. We talked a little bit before about the vulnerability of leadership. Transparency is a great thing, because if people think you're a straight shooter, they believe that you're a straight shooter, and they're going to be much more comfortable as they're going through all the day in and day out ups and downs. I got a few helpful resources that I can provide. You just have to get to me an email or give me a call and I'll help you out getting these materials. This is an ebook that is very descriptive. It's 20 or 30 pages long, but it's very descriptive and has a lot of good insights in it to be able to take action in terms of surviving the economic downturn. It's really all geared toward the people aspect. It's not really technical. It's all about maintaining a healthy and happy workforce. And then we have 90-minute virtual work sessions to be able to work through for leaders and for managers, mid-level managers, for building team building through change. It's very interesting. These are great. There's a whole bunch of information that comes with it. You get assessments, and I am doing these for most if you're qualifying organization, totally free of charge. It's like a $2,500 value, but if you qualify, I'm happy to do those for companies in the area. And then another aspect of things that we can help with is a team awareness work session. Again, it includes behavioral assessments for up to a team of 5. And for qualifying organizations, and I can do that. And when I say qualifying organizations, some of us are doing really, really well because of the times, and many of us are struggling, and I really want to help all companies, but particularly those that are struggling right now. I do have these resources and I'm able to provide at no cost. And we can talk about questions and answers.
Okay. All right. Well, Noel, we do have a question in the chat room from Luann. And I think that this would go back to the beginning of your presentation where you listed some actions, right? And Luann's question is, if there were 1 or 2 of those actions that a company should focus on, which ones would they be?
Good question. Good question. I'm going to go back through the beginning of this. For some reason, we just lost our screen share. Let me just go back real quick.
That's all right.
Sorry.
While you do that, I'll encourage others who may have a question to please put them in the chat room. There they are.
I think this is the slide that we're asking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So
and Luann says, yes, that is the list.
That is the list. Very good. Well, I tell you what, the things that I would concentrate on that I think that are most important have to do with measuring and diagnosing your current culture. This one right here is very, very, very important. Very important. That really has to be done on a regular basis. It really should be done. The other one that's extremely important is that employees need to be rewarded for their behaviors, because it's through that positive types of recognition that individuals are going to be more inclined to follow suit and to realize that those behaviors are really being valued, and that it's part of being, a member of the organization. And then the other one that I think is really important is to really treat your employees fair and really, really take a pulse with your folks and to really understand their outlook on the organization. And that doesn't happen just with, reports or doing it in staff meetings. That means just really getting belly to belly with the people that you work with and really just talking in a way that people feel that it's okay to talk about difficult things. Having said that, this entire list is really important, but that would be my top 3 at this point.
All right, very good and great advice. Noel, we cannot thank you enough for sharing your presentation with us today and actually making it fun to do to participate with Menti. That was a really nice touch. But also, I think it's been really good for us to think through what we need to do with our teams as we are working in a very different way than we have previously worked, where now some of us have returned to the office, some of us have not, but to really be intentional about how we keep our teams together and engaged with us, because truly our employees are the greatest assets of our organizations, and we do want to make sure that we protect them. And so thank you for being with us today. We greatly appreciate it. And we're going to make sure that we share your information in our post-call communication. I do want to thank everyone else who was on the call today. I hope you found it beneficial. And please join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock for Think Ahead Thursday with Luann Flanders-Steck, our Executive Vice President of Entrepreneurship for Launch Greensboro. Luann's going to continue our HR conversation with Sean Straub with Alt HR Partners on new regulations as we go back to work in our offices. So it's an open discussion tomorrow, so please come with your questions. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Noel.
You're welcome. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.